Michelle Marie McGrath.
Hi and welcome to Unclassified Woman. Today I'm talking to the Buddhist author and psychotherapist Kamalamani, who's based in Bristol in the UK. Her first book, Meditating with Character, was published in 2012, and Other Than Mother, Choosing Childlessness with Life in Mind, is published by Earth Books this month. Kamalamani writes a regular column for the US publication Somatic Psychotherapy Today and is a former editor of Transformations, Journal of Psychotherapists and Counsellors for Social Responsibility. Kamalamani became a Buddhist in her early 20s and loves seeing how age-old teachings like loving kindness and mindfulness are more relevant than ever in the 21st century. Prior to being a therapist, Kamalamani worked with small enterprises on sustainable development projects throughout sub-Saharan Africa and Asia, in parallel with university lecturing and being a family business trainer and facilitator. She loves travelling in her camper van, gardening at the allotment, researching ancestry and cooking for her friends. So I do hope you enjoy this conversation. So hi Kamalamani, so great to have you here today.
Thank you, Michelle. It's great to be asked to be interviewed. I really appreciate it. It's grand.
I'm really looking forward to hearing your perspective, which I think is fascinating and so important, especially moving forward and trying to be, more conscious about the decisions that we make.
Yeah.
So would you mind, just to give us some context, would you mind sharing a little bit about your background and whether you've chosen not to have a child or whether it's been more of a circumstantial situation?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, broadly, I've chosen not to have children, but that process has taken a lot of twists and turns. Until I was 27, I always assumed I'd be a mother. I warmly anticipated motherhood. It wasn't even a question that I wouldn't become a mother, back then. I'm now 45. It's very different. What I think a turning point for me was when I was 27, I didn't actually realize I had a choice. Yeah. And when I woke up to that, it was a real shock. I was a very independent woman. I was off traveling. I was training for Buddhist ordination. And I just didn't realize I had a choice to become a mother or not. So that shock got me thinking about kind of pro-natal, pro-family values and how much they'd affected me over time. So that was quite a key turning point at a time when I was thinking whether I was going to have children. Because I always had this little mantra in my sort of late teens, early 20s, when people would ask me, I'd say, yeah, I'll have kids by the time I'm 30.
Oh.
So that was just always there in my mind. Maybe I was just postponing. I'm not sure. But yeah, when I realised that at 27, I decided provisionally, just for a year, to not have children, just to see how it felt, as it were, just to try it on for size, given that I'd always assumed I'd have kids.
Yeah.
So that was interesting, and I got very interested in researching voluntary childlessness and talking to anyone who would talk to me about it, parents. People who weren't parents, people who were like me, were thinking about it, and probably bored people to death, to be honest. But
well, it's funny. I mean, you really highlight though, because we are completely conditioned. We are living in a pronatal society, and that is the script that we're all conditioned with from being children.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, and certainly it wasn't even. I mean, my family are, in ways, very easygoing. They're not really traditional or anything, but that message is so embedded, isn't it?
Yeah, it's completely insidious, isn't it?
It is, and it's bizarrely, and I think it still is. When I've been presenting stuff about this here in the UK, people are still shocked by the fact there's a choice, and then they think, of course, it's a choice, but there's a moment of realization, which is strange in 2016 that we still feel like that,
And it is, and the majority of women do say, the majority of women that I've spoke to, even if they've ended up not having them or then deciding not to, or they've not been able to for numerous reasons, so often people say, well, I just never assumed that I wouldn't have children. I always just thought it would happen eventually. Exactly. I never considered that was not going to be a part of my future. People can feel very pressured around their mid-30s in particular.
Yeah. exactly. Yeah. But no, I certainly did around that time because you know there's the window's coming to more of an end, isn't it, at that point? And it does become more pressurized.
In that year when you thought,
Yeah.
okay, well, what if I'm just going to consider that I'm not going to have them?
Yeah.
What did you realize once you said you had that shock that, okay, well, actually, this is a choice. So, what were some of the things that, some of the beliefs and questions and points that kind of then came into your awareness?
Yeah, it was a strange mixture. I'm just thinking back 'cause it's a while and now, but part of me felt very free, and quite like my eyes were really open for the first time. Like, oh, I really could, do X, Y, and Z rather than have children. So it felt like horizons opened up. And at the same time, kind of in parallel, I could feel all my own sort of, I don't know, internalized stereotypes coming out, I suppose, of, oh, but would you be a proper woman? Would you be, would you be a responsible person if you did that? Would you ever grow up? All these things that I'd obviously carried around with me
Yeah.
were also in my mind. So, and obviously people judge you. Well, yeah, they do judge you and criticize, even if I would hardly talk about the subject unless people were into it, because it is quite a hot topic. But yeah, sort of a mixture of liberation and freedom and judging myself, really, and my fear of well, what would happen? What if I regret it? All those things, really.
Yeah, and
Uh,
so how were your family and your friends? Did you feel any pressure from them at all?
I think it was hard thinking back early on for my mum. She's a great grandma. She loves kids. I think it was a bit tough on her early on, but now she's really cool with it, really supportive. My dad was fine at the time. He's died since, but he was. I remember him saying, "No, look, if you're not going the conventional path, that's fine by me. You do what you need to do." So I kind of had his blessing in a way. Um, my friends were. I've got a mixture of friends who have children and don't have children, all different ages. So I guess I was lucky in a way because I wasn't just with friends who were all starting to have babies at the same
Yeah.
time. So I think that really helped because I think the pressure would have been enormous if that had been the case. So it was nice to have a mixture of friends, and some saying, "Yeah, go for it." And I did have some really good counsel at the time. I'm, a few friends in the Buddhist order I'm part of saying, "Look, if you really want kids, go for it, but think carefully." And other people saying, "Yeah, just do what you need to do." So I think I was quite supported, really.
Yeah.
Not 100%. There were still people going, "What are you doing?" but I was, maybe I was more supported than other people in that situation, I think.
And so, did you have to go through any process around, like, did you experience any grief at all, or did you feel quite clear about it?
No, I did experience grief. I mean, what happened at the same time? What happened a bit later is I decided to start researching and writing a book about this, which is being launched today, as chance would have it.
Yes.
And what happened about 4 years ago was I hit a point where my writing came to a halt, and I couldn't engage with the material, and I thought it was writer's block or something. I'm quite lucky. I don't suffer from writer's block much, as an author, but I hit a real kind of pause button, and I kind of went a bit soul searching, what's going on here, and I realised I really hit head on that sense of lack that surrounds childlessness, whether it's through choice or circumstance or happenstance.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of almost go through a threshold of experiencing that lack, which it just shrouds this area, doesn't it? It's people's
Yeah.
projections upon us, upon those of us who are without child for whatever reason. And I
Yeah.
think a sense of lack because as women without children, we're still, well, some people see us as deviant, others see us as liberated. Hopefully others see us just in the middle, just as people getting on with their lives. But just that sense of going against the grain, and that felt like a lack because we don't have that social affirmation maybe that mothers and parents do, even though
Yes.
they have different pressures, I know, but not the lack sense. And also there was a sense of my own lack, my own kind of grieving, which I still get fleetingly. I still get that,
Yeah.
but it's still the right choice for me not to have children. But I wouldn't say I was one of those, I definitely know, and it was an easy decision. It wasn't an easy decision at all. So I quite like that because I can still feel that lack on certain days, and I'm still glad to have the freedoms I do have, in terms of time and energy. So it's been a mixed bag, really.
I mean, and that's the beauty of being human, isn't it? And that is the dichotomy.
Yes,
Like, of course, you can see that that must bring a lot of joy for people, as well as being incredibly challenging at the same
absolutely.
time.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I think it's natural to realize that, yes, okay, there's this very intense life experience that I've chosen not to have.
yeah,
And again, it's a very specific relationship and bond that can't be
Yeah.
replicated. But then you go, well, yes, but then every connection I have with any other being is, unique to that
Yeah.
connection as well. So
Yes.
how can we measure it?
Yeah, quite. Yeah, I think there's so much emphasis, isn't there, on unconditional love,
Yeah,
the selflessness of motherhood, and some of those things are true, and other times they're a myth. And I think we just
yeah.
need to get more reality in there about so we don't put so much pressure on parents, because how can anyone be a perfect parent? 24/7. You can't. You're a human. So for everyone's sake, I just wish we could be more real and honest about the whole area of procreation, really.
Absolutely.
Um,
And I mean there's so many myths involved in being a mother,
oh yeah,
and I think often it's really difficult for mums, I know with some of my own friends, to be very open and honest about how
yeah,
difficult it is, because they
yeah.
then can come under a lot of criticism as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And to say that maybe you wouldn't have had children is so taboo. But I have a few friends who are honest enough to say that they would never be without their children, of course. But in another lifetime, they might not have done that, and that's
Yeah.
so taboo to even talk about that stuff in a mindful way. Obviously, because we don't want to hurt people's feelings, but just to support one another in our doubts and fears, really.
Yeah,
Um,
and I mean, it's natural. I'm sure, all parents have felt like that on some days,
yeah,
absolutely, when they've
mm,
had no sleep and they're feeling
right.
really pushed to the wall.
Yeah,
So I think it's completely natural. But yeah, we need to really be able to create more safe, non-judgmental spaces for people to be able to express that as well. So it is
yes,
really about just how
yeah,
we can extend more compassion, I think, to all
absolutely.
women, whatever their situation is. Kamalamani, can you share with us like some of the themes that you explore in that? Because I know that also you take into account the environmental and ecological perspective.
Yes, yeah. So the book, the title, it's quite a long title, but it's called Other Than Mother: Choosing Childlessness with Life in Mind. Um, and it's structured in three parts. So the first part, which is called The Worldly Winds, which is a term taken from Buddhism, kind of looks at the whole backdrop of how we go about deciding, but also the pressures on people in trying to decide about whether to have children or not, and also the growing phenomena of those who are deciding not to have children.
Yeah,
1 in 4 women, isn't it, in so-called Western countries?
yeah,
Uh, the second part looks at a private decision with global consequences, looks at the actual decision making process itself. So, kind of like the nuts and bolts around making a decision, the pros and cons, and really thinking through our own conditioning, like we've talked about just now, in
yeah,
making a decision. And finally, part three is kind of okay, if you decide not to have children, what's the post decision landscape like? So, the title of that is Baby Sized Projects and New Horizons. So, it's really looking at what support do we need in this new terrain of not having children, what role models, kind of what rites of passage, because we kind of lack those. So right now I'm most excited about part three because I'm sort of well into part three myself, but just looking at there is life beyond the decision, because I think that's the other thing which can be very confusing for women making this decision, is there is life after the decision as well,
yeah,
and here we are. And even if you haven't made a decision, I hope in some way that supports women who are childless not by choice,
yes,
to offer maybe hope and space for grieving and loss as well, which are so important. So
absolutely.
it looks at the decision itself, but then I don't know, the themes are so many of them. It looks at gender, it looks at some of the stereotyping, it looks at pronatal culture. There's some Buddhist stuff in there, because obviously I've been a Buddhist since 21 years now, so it's just part of how I write, really, bringing in
Yeah,
Buddhist ideas, but not more implicitly rather than explicitly, if you like. And then also, yeah, this aspect of looking at the environmental and ecological considerations, not simply looking at population pressures, but looking at how our kind of Western runaway consumption means that we're living really unsustainably. And it's a really hot topic, to say perhaps we need to look at how many children we have. But I think we kind of have to look at it if we're going to look at our carbon footprints and live a bit more sustainably, as a species, really. So it's a pretty heavy theme, but it's just trying to encourage that in the debate, because it often gets overlooked now. I think 10, 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, it was a bit more included in the debate, and it fell away a bit. So just wanting to bring that back, really, that
yeah.
consideration.
And when you were doing your research, were you surprised by some of your findings?
Gosh, good question. I was surprised at how little there was. since, well, kind of between, let's think, between the late 60s, 70s and now, how few people talk about the environment and childbearing. People do talk about population pressures, but somehow the link between population, consumption, and our really high expectations for our lifestyles and the pressure on work-life balance and things like that. I was quite surprised how little there was written about that. Yeah, I was. I thought I'd find loads, to be honest, and I didn't. And it somehow feels like the green agenda, for want of a better word, it does feel like it's a difficult one to hold that position, I think, because it is a private decision to have kids, and it does have global consequences, like my book says. So it's holding that kind of uncomfortable question, really, without preaching at anybody, because who wants to do that? Nobody does. So I was surprised by that, I think. Yeah.
I mean, it's a very fine line, isn't it? And especially with people who've got a very strong attachment and who've always yearned to be a mother, and that's what they always wanted from being a child.
It was kind of hard to navigate that territory. In fact, this time last year, I thought, I can't do this. I can't finish it because it's so hard to navigate. And I just really want to encourage people to think, if they are a bit more ambivalent or they're not so sure, maybe just to think again, really.
Somebody mentioned to me a couple of weeks ago, I don't know what the figures are like in Great Britain, but apparently in Australia, we have 5.5 million disposable nappies going into landfill every day.
Oh my giddy aunt, gosh.
Yeah, and
that's
it's in excess of 2 billion every year. So I was quite shocked at that. And then I thought, actually, it seems small in comparison to the States, where apparently that's around 25 billion per annum.
My God, yeah.
And so when you hear figures like that, that's really shocking, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it's the whole, I think for me, it's the whole picture of the sort of throwaway age we're in, which is, you can kind of do your best, you can try and live sustainably, but it's very hard given that we're in we have throwaway nappies, and it's hard not to use those, because why wouldn't you? If you were a mum, I probably would. And there are ways around it, but we're in a system, and we can do so much as individuals, but obviously we are part of a system with governments and communities and pressure groups and other people. So I suppose it's like joining together. I mean, I think the statistic that stays with me is that in terms of carbon footprints in the UK, I think the average person is living as if there's 4 planets rather than 1. And in the United States, in terms of resource use, they're living as if there's 8 planets. So in the more developed countries, for want of a better phrase, we're living as if there's several planets rather than the one we've got. So that's quite serious in terms of what's going to happen to us as a species, given that life on Earth is interdependent, given the extinction crisis of the 6th extinction crisis of all the other human species in the world. And it's actually not an environmental problem. It's a whole system problem, I think. I think it's seen as a green problem, when I think it's actually, things are starting we need to start addressing these things fairly quickly, and climate change, obviously, and things like that. So there's big questions, really.
It is, and if you listen to some politicians, there's no such thing as climate change.
No, that's it.
It's a complete fallacy, apparently.
It's just made up, isn't it?
Yeah.
All those very clever scientists are making it up, which is terrifying, really. So just wanting to raise that awareness of that, and I think that's changing quite quickly. Here in the UK, I think there's much more awareness of, we need to do something. But also it's very hard to know what to do, isn't it, on an individual level. So it's just getting people to join forces, dialogue more, take action where they can, I think.
Yeah, and often, unless you're directly impacted in quite a dramatic way, often people don't change their habits, do they? That's the thing. No. I mean, that's quite a human thing, really. People get very set in their comfort zone and very set in their habits.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's easier to do that, isn't it, than think through, when you watch the news and you think of some of the things that are going on climate-wise, it's too much to bear, actually, and some of seeing the refugee crisis, and more of that will happen because of climate change. That's a lot to take in after a long day at work, isn't it? So it is about building people's resources as well as just getting them to look, I think. So it's another delicate balance, really.
Yeah. And taking small steps in the right direction, at least, because often when we are faced with these scenarios, it can seem so overwhelming that often people can think, well, if I just, take these small steps, then that's not going to have enough of an impact. So I think there's that as well on one side of it, where people can feel quite helpless in making any meaningful change or enough of a contribution. And so then they end up not doing anything. I think we're all guilty of that to a degree.
Oh, definitely. it's easier sometimes, isn't it? Just think, oh, I can't change anything. I'll just give up and, live my little life. But then other times you think, no, come on, this is good. And really, I suppose it's just the intention, having our eyes open, which matters, doesn't it? That we're just doing what we can. And I'm thinking of the next generation, whether or not we produce those children, we've got the next generation to think about, really.
Absolutely. I mean, we're all interconnected, aren't we? If we think of the
Absolutely.
earth as being, one being and us all being
Yeah.
interconnected and part of that, which we are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And each species relies on the other, whereas at the moment, humans very much seem to think they're in charge, which is another quite big view to challenge in a way. We act as if we just do what we want, with resources and money and yeah, so it's changing that view as well.
Absolutely. And so having children is also like the traditional form of creative expression in a way on a physical level. And so, how would you say you are expressing that creative feminine energy, apart from obviously, I know you're doing your writing, of course?
Yeah, I think writing has been a really important way of doing that. I think I found my feet, if you like, in terms of writing in the last 5-10 years. I wrote my first book 4 years ago that was published. And I think for me, writing about childlessness has been creative because I've wanted to create something without creating an earthling, an actual human being. So that's been amazing. I think it's really sparked my creativity that we're actually writing about this subject area. So certainly writing, but also I was just visualizing having my hands in the earth. I love gardening. I love growing vegetables. And I'm happiest often just, knee deep in mud, weeding at the allotment just up the road from where we live. Because again, it's earth touching. It's right back to basics. And you see the cycle of life the whole time. It is, it's amazing, really.
Very grounding.
Very grounding, and seeing things grow, blossom and die away. Just seeing that it's moving as well as creative, just reminding me of life, really.
And those natural cycles.
Yeah. And how much control we think we have over things, something about that, which is always funny because you think I'll grow amazing beans, the bean crop gets eaten 3 times in a row, just looking at how the universe has a bit of a laugh at us a lot of the time, and we can miss that quite easily because we're so serious about our lives being on track. So I enjoy the playfulness of that as well, I think.
Absolutely. And so what would you suggest to somebody who would just like to start maybe taking small steps in being more environmentally conscious with their decisions? I mean, not necessarily about whether they're going to have a child or not, but just how can they start to have a bit more awareness?
Yeah, I think the most important thing before, probably with anything we're looking at, rather than try and change things, first of all, it's observing what do you actually do in your life, because if you sometimes you keep a track of your money and it can really shock you what you spend your money on, what you don't spend your money on. Just really simple things like how many trips, how often do you use your car, how often do you fly, how often do you take the bus, because that in itself can have a big impact. Where do you buy your food from? Do you buy locally? Do you buy all stuff shipped in from China? Probably not China, but where do you buy things? So literally just observing what you do and how you do it. And is your house overheated and you leave the heating on all the time? So those really simple everyday things, watching what you do, because those things, and how we heat our houses. Do we have solar panels, or are there other ways we can look at how we heat our houses, particularly in the UK? Maybe it's not such an issue where you are, but maybe it is. But looking at how we heat our homes, which is a big contributor to our carbon footprint. So really starting with the basics. And not just thinking if I recycle it'll be okay. It's just more looking at the whole system of it. And getting curious, I think, and looking at diet. Could I not eat meat once a week if you really love meat, or if you're maybe I could go vegan once a week, or just starting from where we are as well, because that's really important to start from where we are, being honest and kind. Because if you start judging yourself, it's not gonna, you won't be able to change, really, because you won't feel good about it. So just looking at what we're doing and how we're doing it. In all aspects of our lives, and then just tweaking what we can. And there's so much information available now about how to do that, but just maybe starting with one thing, like you're saying, and just getting more interested in it, really. Just where our things come from. I think that in itself is quite a revolution, because it's so easy to buy. If you've got the money, there's so many things you can just buy without thinking about it. So thinking about our consumption habits as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it, really? And so what would you feel are the major benefits that you're experiencing personally by not having had a child?
Right. I think, the first one that comes to mind would be having enough quiet time to write. Because I think writing, because I do, I work as a psychotherapist, I work in my family business, I've got a busy life. So having some time where I can just go quiet and get into the zone for writing is really important.
Yeah.
I love being an auntie. So that's I'm glad to have time to do that. And I think my nieces and nephew kind of like the fact that they're pretty special to me because I don't have my own children. So that's rather lovely. And my brother and his partner have got 4 children. So, they've got their hands full. So I like spending time with them. And really having the time to devote to work, friendships, family, really. Yeah. And practice as a Buddhist, which is obviously very important to me as well. So time to meditate, which might be harder if I had children, things like that. Time
Absolutely.
to go on retreat.
Definitely, I think.
Yeah, I imagine that would be it'd be tricky. It's hard enough for me to get to the meditation store without distraction, let alone if I had 3 children. So so just having more time to contemplate maybe and reflect as well.
And as you mentioned, I mean, it's great that you're able to have those focused relationships with your niece and nephews. Like, as you say, if you've got the distraction of having your own children as well, of course you can still have a close relationship with them,
Sure.
but I guess your attention can be fully on them when you're with them.
Yes. Yeah, which is great. 'Cause we can do loads of stuff, and I just sort out the mess afterwards. I don't have to have my own children as well, it is lovely. It's very precious, actually, very precious role to me. So yeah,
absolutely. And so, well, thank you so much for your time today. And can you share the best place to find you online and where people could get a copy of your book?
certainly. So my website you can find my website at www.kamalamani.co.uk. Shall I spell that?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, it goes on a bit. So it's www, that's the easy bit. And then it's Kamalamani, which is KAMALAMANI. It might be easier to just Google other than mother, because that's a much easier
good
word
idea.
to Google. Other than mother, and it's published by Earth Books, which are a publisher here in the UK, but it's also available all over the world. And it's published 2 weeks today, which is the 29th of April.
Fantastic. Well, that's wonderful.
Facebook too. Sorry, I forgot to say that. There's a Facebook page, which is facebook.com other than mother, if you want to catch me there as well.
Great. Okay. Oh, well, that's fantastic. Oh, well, thank you so much. And I look forward to reading that.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for talking.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to Unclassified Woman. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. For information on events and services, connect with Michelle at michellemariemcgrath.com.